here tonight, I think, because you know, we have gone through some pretty strange discussions. Dr. Lilly and his acid trips with the dolphins, and William Crookes and his taking the pulse of a dead woman, and yeah, it's strange stuff. But I think we go into a more strange and weird experience here, because though you may not have any, you know, dolphin trips or acid trips, or you may not know anything about dead people coming to life and all that kind of stuff, but you do go to sleep. And if you go to sleep, then you'll be interested in this, because it's a very strange thing that, you know, is going to involve sleep and what goes on when a person does go to sleep and the spirit world. But, you know, I myself am always reluctant to get involved in this stuff. I mean, I can stand here very calmly and tell you what Sir William Crookes said and then give you his credentials, what John Lilly said, give you his credentials, what Carl Jung says, give you his credentials. And, you know, that absolves me totally. I mean, you know, nobody can say, you know, you're nuts because I didn't say this stuff. I'm sharing with you what others have found. So I am reluctant to enter into discussions of material such as this unless they are scientifically based. And the reason is that, you know, we can get our total of weird stuff by simply, you know, discussing religion. Talking snakes, water walking, and all the rest, and so forth. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that my personal religious upbringing, which never made sense to me as a child. I mean, I don't know how many other children, I mean really small children, have the same experience that I did, but it was, to me, it was grotesque. I think the first thing was I came from an extremely violent household. I mean, extremely violent. Knives and blood and fights and so forth. Every night running out, hiding in the woods, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it was extremely violent. My father was an alcoholic who just became, you know, like a monster. Every night of the week. So, you know, when they first took me into the church when I was a little kid, and I saw the man hanging on the cross, I said to the person, well, who did that? And she said, you know, his father. I thought, this guy's worse than when I got home. I don't want any part of it. So I mean, you know, but the whole thing was so bothersome to me all my life. I said, what am I being told? This is, you know, I just couldn't handle it. And that was the catalyst, I believe, for my desire to try to find out and to try to communicate to other people what really is going on and what everything is about. And of course, all we can do one to another is share what the minds who dare take that step into this strange invisible place have found. Now, the subject, of course, that we're going to discuss may lead anywhere, and in dreams, nightmares, and in particular, a phenomenon called the Night of the Crusher, or the Night Crusher. Now, what I want to do, first of all, is show you that the Night of the Crusher, which touches everyone one time or another, has scientific merit. So the first thing we'll look at is an overhead from Scientific News. And here it is, Scientific News Online, the weekly magazine of science, July 9th. The Night of the Crusher. The waking nightmare of sleep paralysis propels people into a spirit world. Now, as I said, that has to form a basis here, because this is science news, and you know, it's all scientifically predicated, so that, you know, you can look at it and say, where is this coming from? Well, let me show you. Basically, the first indication of a movement to kind of publicize this happened back in 1781. Now, 1781, more of a superstitious mentality, more of a demonic type of mentality, church stuff, and all of the crazy stuff that church was involved in. But there was an artist by the name of Henry Fuseli, Fuseli, and he painted a picture called The Nightmare. And it looks like what people would describe as a nightmare, yet it has a strange synchronous coincidence with a purpose, connections to other things, and I'll explain as we go along. But I wanted to share with you first Henry Fuseli's concept in 1781 of the nightmare. That is a nightmare. And here you see the demon. This is very important. Here you see the horse. And these are females, believe it or not. Now these are beliefs, and what he was painting was this picture that was based on the accepted superstitions of what was happening. This is the night crusher. Now, people would awake with this sense of some type of otherworldly presence actually sitting on their chest and crushing them, or they couldn't breathe for a period of time, or whatever. And so, as he sat down to paint this thing, he did. And then the rest of the thing was that the night crusher was always accompanied by this very strange horse. So these were all of the, from that time of superstition, these were all of the tales that people would tell who would have this experience of waking up, and, they would feel this of some sort, and so it became this night crusher. So there's a very sexy lady in the painting, as we can see. But the other two things, one is the crusher who is sitting on her chest, and the other is the strange horse noted in the upper left-hand side of the picture. So what I want to do before we get into the night crusher is look up the definition of the word nightmare. Okay? So let's look that up first in the next one. Nightmare, a dream arousing feelings of intense fear, horror, and distress, an event or experience that is intensely distressing, a demon or spirit once thought to plague sleeping people. And, this is basically where this initially came from. That people were so convinced that they saw something, they were attacked with something, there was something lurking in their room. I mean, and so it became all of the above, and that's how today the description of a nightmare is described. Now let's continue with the definition of the word nightmare. A nightmare is a dream of particular intensity and with content that the sleeper finds disturbing. They are usually associated with rapid eye movement, REM, periods of sleep, and may be accompanied by physical movements. Until as late as the 18th century, nightmares were widely considered to be the work of demons, which were thought to sit on the chest of sleepers. So basically that's where, when he painted that, it was based on the accepted... So in other words, something was happening to these people that they would wake, they might have a feeling of heaviness on the chest, they might have an inability to breathe, they're scared out of their wits, they just woke up, they don't remember anything, but they feel all of this stuff. And so, obviously, and of course you have the church, with all the demonics and all of that kind of stuff. So it becomes this night crusher. Something comes upon people, and that's how it came out. So looking at that definition, See, we can see where the concept of the painting that Fuseli made of the night crusher came from. I mean, you can, they're feeling, people are feeling this crushing on their chest and something demonic. We'll go to the next picture, which is the same one we saw in the beginning. And the feeling then is it's some kind of a demonic presence. I mean, people are waking up and they're really frightened beyond belief. They're totally frightened and scared. Something is there and something has happened to them. And of course then you got this horse, this female horse that has appeared as well. So the demons and these beliefs about nightmare were always believed to be female, which I can understand. No, not really. But what about the horse? Here's the horse. What about the horse in the painting, which always was supposed to accompany the night crusher? So we want to go back into the dictionary, and we want to look up a female horse. Now, a female horse is a mare, M-A-R-E. Okay, so let's take a look. Mare, the female of the horse and other equine quadrupeds, in 4 legs, and all of this stuff, sighing. But here is another interesting thing about the word mare. In science and medicine, M-A-R means sighing, suffocating, panting, intercepted utterance with a sense of pressure across the chest occurring during sleep. The word mare. See, now this is in medicine, this is in science. And look what it says here. They quote this, I don't know where this came from, Shack origin. I will ride thee, O nights, like a mare. And basically, that's where this thing, the accompanying of the horse, and the fact, 2 things here. Mare means the pressure. So in other words, nightmare meant at nighttime this terrible thing going on with a person feeling this, and then, of course, the horse. And so the horse shows up in the picture and the origin of the word nightmare. So it's very interesting, because we know that the word mare means a female horse, but in medicine it means pressure across the chest during sleep. Now, notice the ancient quote, I will ride thee, O nights, like the mare. So we have the words night and mare together. And now we bring together the pressure on the chest and the horse we saw on the page. So all of these things, more or less, come. We can see why Fuseli drew the picture as he did. Okay? And we can see here where the horse and where the mare, actually the word according to science, medicine, has all of the same symptoms as this crusher business, and so how it all came together. Where words come from, who knows? But we're developing here a whole new concept of the origin and the meaning of the term nightmare. I mean, before you came here today, a nightmare, was, oh, geez, this is a nightmare. It could be some terrible thing happening, or it could be, you're sleeping and you have this bizarre event that goes on, and nobody knows how or where. But now all of a sudden you find the origins of this go back to some kind of either hallucinatory type of situation that involve people waking out of a deep sleep and being, involved with this like horse and this demon of some sorts. So we start to look at a whole different type of thing. And then we'll look again at the painting of Fuseli, and we have this sense of pressure on the chest, and you can see that here, so that would be mare. And then we have the horse that is part of the demonic superstition tradition. But you know what I thought? Which of the 4 horses of the apocalypse would you choose this one to be? Where, that makes you wonder, where do these things really come from? Initially, where did they really come from? You know, somebody who wrote about the four horses of the apocalypse obviously was on some kind of a trip, whatever it was, and was seeing or hallucinating or some time of situations. But let me show you another variation of the Fuseli painting, which it's a variation of it, was done by him, but a little differently, and it concentrates more on the horse than the demon. Let's see. You see it here. I mean, that would startle you. That would startle you. You know, you wouldn't wake up and say, nice horsey, horsey. You know, what would you do? So here then, in the middle of the night, we have a mare. We have a nightmare, and that's the point that Fuseli, I don't know, with his name, you might want to look that up. It sounds like an Italian name. Whether, you know, no, I'm not, I'm just saying that the artist might have been from Italy. But here we have an extremely good look at a nightmare. See, what, you know, you talk about mythology, you talk about symbolisms. How does, you know, how can you convey something without saying a word? Well, if you know that this woman is sleeping, it is pitch black, it's obviously night, and the horse, you know, the picture says nightmare. And that's what the picture says. No. This is the point. This is the struggle. I mean, this is a horrendous thing that she's going. You know, the thing is, she's still feeling this in her chest. This is a terrible time of fright that's happening. I mean, she's not just snoozing here. This is. I mean, you know. I mean, just imagine if you woke up and saw that. I mean, you know. But you know, what does all this mean? And why would we consider it today? And I have opinion in the past, and I've presented that opinion to you, that dreams were not make-believe effects of the brain, but rather real, live experiences that occur with your other self when your physical body goes to sleep. And I, you know, in the studies and the research that I've done on this, I feel very, very good about it, because it seems as though some of the very prestigious Harvard-type scientists agree with me. But what I have proposed from here to you is that you never have slept since you've been alive, but simply become aware of your other self's exploits in a parallel universe when this body of yours shuts down. When this body of yours shuts down, you can't use it. And so then, instantly, you are aware of your experience at another place, in another time, in another parallel universe or dimension. So, and you know, if you look and think about that, this is the same event that we call death. Except that in death, in the death state, rather than the sleep state, the body is no longer capable of containing you, the electro person, the soul. Thus, you simply continue your life in that other dimension. You switch. You're out of here. You see, if you look in the Bible, it talks about the silver cord, before the silver cord is cut. Well, in other words, there is, you know, an electrical connection. You go to sleep, your body shuts down, and you leave. You're now in your other body in a different parallel universe and so forth. But there is still an electrical connection to the body that's lying in the bed. See? And so the situation is, since that body is alive, as it starts to restore itself, bingo, instantly you come back and you're back into this body. Now, as weird as that sounds, and as strange as it sounds, and as uneducated as it sounds, because I'm not educated in the realms of that, I will show you documentation from very, very prestigious people of science who say that that's what's happening. So you simply then, when if you put your body to sleep, for all intents and purposes, it's dead, though it's not. goes into a paralysis of some kind, but you're gone, but you're going to come back because the body is still active. And it's still going to attract you back, draw you back because of the electrical connection to it. But when it's dead, there's nothing to come back to. But it doesn't make it any less real that your event is going on just as it is when you have a dream, except it doesn't end. It continues until in that parallel universe you put that body to sleep. So in death the body does not wake up, and that part of your living experience concludes and you carry on in the other. Now we've seen several interesting things here. The demon on the chest, the horse, the dream. Then we found that the word that defines a female horse, which is a mare, also means pressure on the chest. So we have the pressure on the chest from the demon, we have the horse, and the picture that is the painting created by Fuseli is the nightmare. So we've interconnected the night, the horse, the dream, and the chest pressure. So we say, so what? What does that mean? Well, let's go back to the Science News where we started. In their report on the night of the crusher, let's take a look at it from a scientific perspective. Now, we looked at this when we started. No, you can, right here, Science News Online, the night of the crusher, the waking nightmare of sleep paralysis propels people into a spirit world. This is only printed July 9th, 2005. I mean, it's just a week ago or so. And the writer for Science News is Bruce Bauer. Now, you and I, and if you've been watching on TV here, we have studied the works of scientists such as John Lilly, Jeremy Narby, and others who took the strange things that all of us experience at one time or another. Do you know how many strange things you've experienced that you wouldn't dare tell anybody? And they're just kept hidden into you. Maybe you forget them, but you've experienced things. You've experienced things in these dream states or waking out of a dream state or strange things that you never told anybody. John Lilly, Jeremy Narby, and these other people are people with immense scientific credentials, immense educational credentials, all kinds of college degrees and blah, blah, blah. And yet they were willing to step off that cliff into the unknown to see for themselves, to investigate their origins and our origins and to find out what the heck is going on. We talked about Jeremy Narby. John Lilly, took acid and drugs and made this special tank in the water where he would go in under acid and then actually become a dolphin. I mean, all of this bizarre stuff. He would take extraterrestrial trips, but the doggone point of it was he had such impeccable educational and scientific degrees that you had to just stand in awe when this guy spoke. He didn't just go in and have a trip. He wrote everything and studied it and presented it in scientific journals. Jeremy Narby, an anthropologist, went to the Amazon to determine how uneducated shamans who dressed nothing but a loincloth sitting around a fire could become pharmaceutical geniuses and be able to combine plants to heal diseases. And he had to take a drug that they used in order to see for himself. He had the courage to do it. Carl Jung, who was probably the greatest psychoanalyst of his time, took drugs, and people said to him, "What in the world are you doing? You're ruining yourself." He said, "I'm not." He says, I've got to find out what these people are talking about. What are they? I've got to see for myself. So Carl Jung, along with Narby and Lilly, you know what they showed us? There is another force at work in our lives that we cannot see, but nonetheless we experience on almost a daily basis in one way or another. So I want to introduce you tonight to another anthropologist by the name of David Hufford. And this is David Hufford. David J. Hufford, the Department of Humanities, Penn State College of Medicine, Hershey Medical Center. He is the professor in the Department of Humanities at the Penn State College of Medicine, with the joint appointments in behavioral science, family and community medicine. He is also director of the Dr. Knill Center for Humanistic Medicine at the Hershey Medical Center, an endowed center devoted to improving doctor-patient communication. That's David J. Hufford. So he has, once again, great credentials. Now, the report in Science News specifically speaks about the experience that David Hufford had with the night crusher. As a college student in 1964, Hufford met the dreaded night crusher. And he fell into a deep sleep. And an hour later, he awoke with a start to the sound of the bedroom door creaking open. The same door he had locked and bolted before going to bed. And Hufford then heard the footsteps moving toward his bed. And he felt an evil presence. And terror gripped him. He couldn't move a muscle. His eyes were held open in fright. And an impressive weight compressed his rib cage. Breathing became difficult, and he said, "I thought I was going to die." And at that point, the lock on his muscles gave way. He got up and sprinted several blocks to take refuge at the student union. It was very puzzling, he recalls, but I told nobody about what had happened. Now, Hufford's perspective on this strange encounter was transformed in 1971. He was a young anthropologist studying folklore in Newfoundland, and he started to talk to people up there about their eerily similar nighttime encounters. A person wakes up, feels paralyzed, and perceives some kind of a presence. And something then climbs up on top of the petrified victim, creating a crushing sensation on his or her chest. And it took Hufford another year to establish that what he and these people of Newfoundland had experienced corresponds to the event lasting seconds or minutes that sleep researchers now call sleep paralysis. Of course, there was no demon, there was no horse. Yet the experience was one that was recounted that way from centuries past. In other words, his experience was in 1964, but in the 1700s, 1600s, 1500s, people were talking about the experience that he had. Look what he says here in Overhead 12. Although widely acknowledged among traditional cultures, sleep paralysis is one of the most prevalent yet least recognized mental phenomena for people in industrialized societies, Hufford says. Let's go on to the next one. Curiously, although the word nightmare originally describes sleep paralysis, it now refers to a fearful or disturbing dream, says Hufford now at the Penn State Medical Center. Several hundred years ago, the English referred to nighttime sensations of chest pressure from witches and other supernatural beings as the mare, from Anglo-Saxon maren, meaning to crush. The term eventually morphed into nightmare, the crusher who comes in the night. Notice in the second paragraph the word mare. We talked about from the Anglo-Saxon mare, which means to crush, but as we've seen in Fuseli's picture and in the ancient legend, it's synchronicity. See? The ancient legend was that the demon came with the strange horse, and there was this crushing pressure. And the word mare means to crush, but it also means the female horse. So it's synchronous. Somehow these things come together to be the same, thing. But now here in the scientific evaluation of the phenomena, we begin to get to the bottom line. Let's take a look here. Sleep paralysis embodies a universal, biologically based explanation for pervasive beliefs in spirits and supernatural beings, even in the United States, Hufford argues. The experience thrusts mentally healthy people into a bizarre alternative world that they frequently find difficult to chalk up to a temporary brain glitch. Something happened. So what Dr. Hufford is saying is that this type of thing, sleep paralysis, something that goes on inside of the mind during the sleep period when we move, it is what is the pervasive beliefs in spirits and supernatural beings, in other words. Yeah? So David Hubbard is stating that sleep paralysis is a real thing, and it causes mentally healthy people to be thrust into the world of spirits and supernatural beings, which they insist is not make-believe. Now, Hufford doesn't believe, and he goes on to say, that an invisible force attacked him in his college room, but he sees the appeal of such an interpretation. And this is what he said. Listen to this very closely, what Dr. Hufford says. We need to deeply question 2 centuries of assumptions about the non-empirical and non-rational nature of spirit belief. Now, let me explain that. In using the word non-empirical, he's saying that we have to begin to look into the possible reality of the world that we cannot see. Okay? He said we've had 200 years of assumptions about the nature of spirits. Oh yeah, well, you know, it's some church thing. No, he said, in other words, in this dream state, do we actually move into that parallel universe where things exist just as we do? And as a result, are our experiences sometimes nice and sometimes frightening, just like here? Now, there is another, I don't know, a psychologist, but his name is Alan Chine of the University of Waterloo in Canada. And you can take that. This is what he says. Listen carefully. In the past 10 years, Alan Chine of the University of Waterloo in Canada has collected more than 28,000 tales of sleep paralysis. According to one, it says, the first time I experienced this, I saw a shadow of a moving figure, arms outstretched, and I was absolutely sure it was supernatural and evil. And then another person awoken to find a half-snake, half-human thing shouting gibberish in my ear. Yet another person reported waking with a start just after falling asleep and sensing an ominous presence nearby. And the tale continues, then something comes over me and smothers me as if with a pillow, and I fight, but I can't move. I try to scream, and I wake up gasping for air. And Shine says, many who experience sleep paralysis also report sensations of floating, or flying, or falling, or leaving one's body. And he says the condition's primary emotion, terror, sometimes yields to feelings of excitement and exhilaration, rapture or ecstasy. A small number of people, while acknowledging fear during initial episodes, come to enjoy the experience. Chine regards the sight, sounds, and other sensations of sleep paralysis as hallucinations. You want to put the next one on? That share a biological kinship with dreaming. This is Fuseli's painting of the Night Crusher. The sights, sounds, and other sensations of sleep paralysis as hallucinations that share a biological kinship with dreaming. Well, one of the questions that arise is the response of the physical body to all of this. You're asleep, your body is asleep, and yet you are somewhere else, somehow, somewhere, and you're doing something, and it's as real as can be, and you're thinking, and you're interacting with people, and you're touching people, and on the other hand, your body is still alive, so there's an electrical connection between you, wherever you are, and your body, which is laying there. So if you were dead, if the body was dead, then you'd continue on where you are. But there, since it's still alive, there are signals coming being picked up by the body brain, the body then has a normal fight or flight syndrome reaction, and things begin to happen physically. And I'll show you how this is described. I mean, you can talk to Joan, you can talk to Ethel, people who have been in medicine, and they'll tell you that when you get into a situation where it's scary or where some kind of threat, your body automatically, without any need from you, goes into what they call the fight or flight syndrome, and the body prepares, anticipating a cut or damage to itself to coagulate the blood and all this kind of stuff. And so what kind of fight or flight syndrome would the body go in if it's anticipating something from that? It's not there, but somehow it's picking up a signal of that thing. And so what then would the body do to prepare for it? Oh boy, this is going to get really better and better. Or worse and worse. I don't know how we're... Let's take a look at what he says, Dr. Chine. 2 brain systems contribute to sleep paralysis, Chine proposes. The most prominent one consists of inner brain structures that monitors one's surroundings for threats and launches responses to perceived dangers. As Chine sees it, REM-based activation of this system, in the absence of any real threat, triggers a sense of an ominous entity lurking nearby. So in other words, the brain is picking up electrical signals that there's a problem. And of course that demon we saw would be a big problem with a weird horse. And so the body starts to go into this flight or fight syndrome. Something's going to happen here. The body can't sense anything physically, but it senses an ominous entity lurking nearby. So you wake up, where am I? And you're looking around and you're freaking out. See, let's consider this for a minute. Your brain would be picking up signals from you of an encounter that you're having, even though you're not in the body. In your waking state, the sensing of danger would initiate that fight or flight. Now this is different though, because you're out of the body. You're involved with somebody else, something else, somewhere else, but since your body is alive, you are attached to it electrically, and these signals are getting to the brain. And the brain doesn't know, it doesn't see anything, but there has to be some kind of ominous thing going on somewhere. Well, the ominous thing going on somewhere is what you're doing or what you're having happen to you in that parallel universe, in that other dimension. So the brain and the body does not perceive any threat. You're sleeping comfortably. But because it's receiving that signal from you from the parallel universe, it triggers this sense of this ominous entity. Now there's 2 scientists by the name of McNally and Clancy. You can take that down. And they have been studying people in connection with sleep paralysis and the crusher. They have been studying people who claim to have been abducted by aliens and UFOs, and they connect that to the crusher. Let's take a look at this. Now here we have a UFO flying over, but this is what Clancy and McNally said, and incidentally Clancy is a woman. There is a kinship between, and I only say that to try to identify the people. There is a kinship between waking nightmares starring night crushers, I like that, starring night crushers, and reports of alien abductions. McNally and Clancy find for more than a decade they have been studying people who claim to have been abducted by aliens from outer space. McNally and Clancy are convinced that these claims derive from sleep paralysis hallucination. Say that they really have been abducted, but not in this dimension. In that dimension, but it still is real as if it happened in this room. And it is real. In other words, they're saying that they believe that the night crushers and the alien abductors are the same thing, only in a different adventure. This would not mean the people being abducted or not. Their experience is real. Their brain would react to it because their body was alive while this experience was happening somewhere else. You know, one of the things that Dr. John Lilly told us, and I mean, he would be the first one to announce it. He said, well, you don't, I remember the newspaper reporter said, you don't have very many people come up here. He says, well, who would come up here? I'm crazy as hell. But, you know, he was brilliant nonetheless. And what Dr. Lilly said is that hallucinations are real. You know, you may look at that person and say, that person is hallucinating. Well, maybe not in real, in this dimension of the five senses, but very real in the parallel universe. If that person, even awake and alive, is talking to someone, you say, oh my gosh, what Lilly is saying, no, that person that he's talking to is real. When we encounter a person we consider troubled, and the fact is that indeed in our realm they are talking to themselves. But we're not where they are. Beyond the body in that parallel universe, they're talking to someone else. Here's what McNally and Clancy go on to say. Accounts of space alien encounters typically begin with the abductee waking in the night while lying face up, McNally says. The person can't move, but senses electric vibrations. A feeling of terror makes breathing difficult. Alien beings advance to the foot of the bed or climb on top of the person, who then experiences a sense of floating or of being transported to an alien craft. So, in other words, it has its roots in the same Night of the Crusher, you know, what they're saying, you know. And yet it doesn't mean it is not happening. So we may say, oh, well, it's a dream, it's a nightmare, but as we are finding, and we will find more, the experience is something that has occurred outside of the body. But since the body was alive, electrical signals conveyed to the brain the activity, something is happening here somewhere else. Now here is where these people, Clancy and McNally, say happens after they have an initial interview with those who claim to be abducted by aliens. That's what they say. Days or weeks later, in response to a therapist's hypnotic suggestion, the abductee may generate details of being sexually probed or otherwise assaulted by the aliens. Claims of abductions by space aliens trigger much controversy, media attention, and ridicule. The late Harvard psychiatrist John Mack, and I'm going to introduce you to him. He was something. The late Harvard psychiatrist John Mack fueled the hubbub by defending the accounts as descriptions of actual encounters with visitors from other planets. Here's another guy, John Mack. Unfortunately, John Mack was killed in an automobile accident in Europe a couple of years ago, last year, I'm not sure. This guy was the head of the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard University. What are you going to, it's like, William Crookes. What are you going to say, he's nuts? See, this is what's so terrific about this. People would order, oh, no, don't go there, saying all that crazy stuff. I didn't say anything. I'm talking about the opinion of the head of the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard University. And there's a reason that he said what he said. And as I said, John Mack was killed in an accident in Europe. But without straying too far from the Night of the Crusher, because I want to get back to that, and we don't get. I want to introduce you to the late Harvard head of psychiatry at Harvard University, John Mack, and that's him. And I want you to see what he said. Now remember, I mean, you don't get a position in Harvard like that unless you know special things. But let's see what he says about this. There is, I believe, a gradation of experiences that goes from the most literal physical kinds of hurts, wounds, person removed, spacecraft that can be photographed, to experiences which are more psychological, spiritual, involve the extension of consciousness. Now listen real closely, if you can, to what Dr. Mack said. The difficulty for our society and for our mentality We have a kind of either-or mentality. It's either literally physical or it's in the spiritual other realm, the unseen realm. What we seem to have no place for or have lost the place for are phenomena that can begin in the unseen realm and cross over and manifest and show up in our literal physical world. We can't deal with that. And why can't we deal with it? Because we have all, like sheep, followed behind the pastors and the priests and the religion, and they tell us all this stuff that they have no clue about. And so we turn to a person of impeccable credentials, and he says, we have lost the place that we can understand the phenomena that can begin in the unseen and cross over to us in the seen. We can't deal with it. We're told to be afraid of it. We're told to stay away from it. Just to read the books and sing the songs, but don't understand the reality of what we call God and spirits and all of this stuff. Now let's see how John Mack added to this about alien abductions when they asked him, well, is this literal or, it really happened? This is what he said. The phenomenon, is this where I'm at here? Well, anyhow, he said, you stay right there, John, that's fine. He said, the simple answer would be yes. It's both literally, physically happening to a degree. And it's also some kind of psychological, spiritual experience occurring and originating perhaps in another dimension. And then he goes on, and so the phenomenon stretches us, or it asks us to stretch, to open to realities that are not simply the literal physical world, but to extend to the possibility that there are other unseen realities from which our consciousness, or if you will, learning processes over the past several hundred years have closed us off. See what he said? So when they said, Dr. Mack, are you saying that these alien abductions really happen? He says, yes, look, it's both literal, it did really happen, to a degree. And that's very important. He throws in that caveat, to a degree. It's real, to a degree. But, he says, it's also some kind of psychological, spiritual experience originating perhaps in another dimension. See? It's really real. It really happened. It's physically true. But it could have originated in another dimension, in a parallel universe. And then he goes on to say, and this is so important, but there are unseen realities. But our learning processes over the past several hundred years have closed us off. Where does they come from? They come from religion. They come from the church. The past, oh, this is evil. Oh, that's the devil. Oh, don't go there. Oh, you'll open your mind to devil. And all this stuff. And these people are totally ignorant about this. They haven't a clue about this. And so we have to, you want to turn to the pastor for his description of what this is? Or would you rather turn to the guy who was the head of psychiatry at Harvard University? I know where I'm going to go. John Mack says so much here, so much that is very important and really is at the basis of why we have been so separated from God and the realm we call spirit. He says, Manuel, I just told you that it's not 100%, but to a degree there's something real going on. But it's hard to describe as totally physically real. But I believe the key here is that it's an experience that's originating perhaps in another dimension, like a parallel universe. In the second paragraph there, or whatever, he makes that profound point that we've been taught, what we've been taught as little kids from religion has totally separated us from ever understanding the unseen. Now I want to run back from John Mack now and get back to the Night Crusher. But before we do that, I want to conclude with John Mack's comments about himself when he was a professor of psychiatry at Harvard. You can take that down. He was asked this question, Dr. Mack, aren't you really at risk of losing quite a bit personally and professionally because of the criticism that comes from taking such a stand? He said, you know, I think that in some ways I've gained more than I've lost in terms of inviting people into this mystery, having a dialogue with all kinds of very wonderful, open, intelligent, brilliant people from many different fields. It's been quite exciting. I mean, I've been attacked, but the attacks really haven't been really nearly as serious to me as the openness that I found among many people throughout the culture and internationally who are saying, yeah, I always suspected something like this was going on, and I'm glad you were willing to come forward and talk about it. And then John Mack concluded by saying this. It's often said that I'm a believer and sort of have gone and lost my objectivity. Well, I really object to that, because this is not about believing anything. I didn't believe anything when I started. I don't really believe anything now. I've come to where I've come to clinically. In other words, I worked with people over hundreds and hundreds of hours, and I've done as careful a job as I could to listen, to sift out, to consider alternative explanations, and none have come forward. No one has found an alternative explanation in a single abduction case. Hey! I listened to him. And that's what the statement of John Mack reminds me of, the statement of Sir William Crookes, who claimed the appearance of a woman who's dead and whose pulse was taken in his presence. And he was attacked, and people were saying, are you going to stand there and tell us that it's possible for a woman to come back from the dead and you can take her pulse? And he said, no, I didn't say it was possible. I said it happened. So here John Mack said that he came to his conclusions not based on belief, if you read that, but based on clinical studies. Now, where we were before, and Joan, you can take that down, we entered the consideration of John Mack. We were considering the night of the crusher, those so-called dreams that cause us to awaken in a total panic. It was at that point that the two scientists, McNally and Clancy, were discussing, if you remember, the phenomena of people who claim to have been abducted by aliens, with the suggestion that this could be associated with the crusher that has been spoken of for thousands of years. And the scientist McNally, and speaking of people who claim to have been abducted by aliens, says, traumatic encounters that a person seems to experience during sleep paralysis feel as vividly real as anything that happens during the day. So we've talked about that so often here. And I've proposed to you over and over that your so-called dream is really an activity that you are experiencing. In other words, tonight, this very night, when your body shuts down and goes to sleep, you're going on a toot. You're off. You're out of here. And you'll experience it, and you'll remember all of it because it's in a different, but you'll experience it. What is going on is absolutely real. You have other selves, and when you turn one body off, it turns another body on. And this is what McNally says, despite their fantastic claims, these people are mentally healthy. Sleep paralysis is an entirely natural phenomenon. Now, what is interesting about this is when these doctors did physical exams of these people, they found the following, and this is amazing. These are people who have gone through this night of the crusher thing. All right, what do they say? Memories of the scary incidents sparked heart rate increases and other physiological stress reactions that exceeded those previously reported for Vietnam veterans as they recalled their distressing combat events. So here's a person that's in bed having night's rest and recounting this, and their physiological the heart and the stress is worse than people who had experienced combat in Vietnam. This is how real this thing is. People have that type of reaction. And Dr. David Hufford who I introduced you to earlier, say, I suspect that millions of people in the United States are walking around never having told anybody about having these terrifying experiences. And look what he says here as we look here. That's unlikely to change anytime soon, he adds. Scientists and physicians treat reports of mingling with supernatural creatures and spirits as evidence of mental imbalance. And mainstream religions condemn connections with ghost demons and evil presence. So there's no study of it. You know, if you go tell anybody about this experience that is real, you're considered crazy. You're nuts. Right? And so what he says, it's not going to change. And then Dr. Hufford concludes by saying this, but the world of sleep works according to its own rules. Whether shunned or embraced, Hufford says, the night crusher returns with frightening regularity. Interesting stuff. So you see, there are people in religion and the sciences who cannot go near the things that drew people such as David Hufford, John Mack, John Lilly, William Crookes, and Carl Jung. The others are like the people in government. They say whatever it is that their particular corporation or organization wants them to say. They don't rock the boat. They don't find fault with anything that their group says.